Hi there, everyone. Alright, let's talk about the other travesty in the Vampire Chronicles that is worse than the book that came before it, Memnoch the Devil. This is book number 5 in terms of continuity and publishing order. Story-wise, it picks up a little while after The Tale of the Body Thief. So there are some spoilers in this book for what happened in the previous one, particularly the states of some characters after the previous one, so just keep that in mind when you're reading this. The premise of this book is Lestat believes he is being followed by the devil, like the Christian devil. And he's actually really frightened by this whole possibility. He enlists the help of David Talbot, who is from the Queen of the Damned. He was in The Tale of the Body Thief. He's back in this book. As well as a couple of new characters that help to propel the plot along. Or at least that's the idea, anyway. The titular devil character, who calls himself Memnoch, he tracks down Lestat and attempts to recruit him in his battle against God. He does so by taking Lestat on a journey through time as he recounts the beginning of creation all the way to the more modern era. Like Lestat, he presents it in a interview-like story format, like a lot of the books previous. Like, it's kind of like Interview with a Vampire in some ways, because Memnoch is talking about his story in terms of, like, it's like Lestat who's interviewing him almost, but instead of Lestat being an interviewer, it's more like Memnoch is just telling the story, and Lestat is, like, prompting him at different points or asking questions at different points, which, yeah, is very similar to Interview with a Vampire in that way. But the book is still told in general from the first-person point of view of Lestat himself, like most of the other books in the series up to this point. So, out of the original 12 books in the Vampire Chronicles, Memnoch the Devil is actually the only book that I did not originally read. I didn't realize until after I picked it up off the shelf and made my TBR video that the spine wasn't broken. I think that was because when I read these books as a teenager, I was disheartened by how The Tale of the Body Thief turned out, and I really did not feel like reading Memnoch the Devil. I think I decided to skip it and come back to it at a later time, and I just forgot about it. Now that I have actually read the book, of course I understand why it was a good idea I originally skipped it. In case you didn't already figure that out, I'm not fond of this book. In fact, I really don't like this book. Now, let me be clear that this book is written in the same manner and as well as the books that came before. Anne Rice's writing style still sticks with me, and it did help to carry me through this book, which is good. It made it easier to read through. That's good because reading this book felt even more pointless than The Tale of the Body Thief, if you can imagine. In fact, I made sure to read Memnoch the Devil first before any other books in my TBR that month, because I was afraid if I put the book down and started another book, I wouldn't pick it up again. Now, don't take what I said as a sign that I'm against religion or theology or stuff along that line. I grew up exposed to a lot of that stuff, actually. I had a parent who sampled Christian and non-denominational religions like customers sample food at a Costco. If this had been probably any other book, I would have been perfectly fine with what was presented here. I will admit it was an interesting read. It was interesting to read about Anne Rice's theology, what she believes about God and the creation of the world and all that jazz. It's definitely a different take, I'll give her that. That being said, I will repeat what I said in my Tale of the Body Thief review for those who have not seen it yet or may have forgotten. If I am reading a vampire novel, to me that carries a certain degree of expectation. I expect a fair bit of vampire representation, feeding, blood and gore, shenanigans, interactions, lore, that sort of thing. A fair bit of stuff connected to vampires, even if that's not really the point of the book. The reason why I rated this book as low as I did is that there's very little of that in this book, like, at all. There was just a little bit in the first third of the book, and a little bit in the last third of the book. There was an instance of menstrual blood feeding that was, in my opinion, a little bit much. Now, authors will do what they want with their work, and I'm not saying they shouldn't. They're the author, they write what they want to write. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. I'm not against Rice because she chose to use Lestat to express her thoughts and beliefs. She can do what she wants. Honestly, don't care either way. This is a vampire novel in a series of novels about vampires, okay? This book is about as far removed from that as you can get without removing the vampires entirely. No. Just no. That's not always a bad thing. But for me, for this book, that was a bad thing. The reason why I think it was bad is because if you take away the plot of the book literally doesn't exist at all. It no longer has a reason to exist without the plot. Even while reading the book, as well written as it is, the entire time, from start to finish, I felt like it was literally pointless to read it. I didn't felt like it developed Lestat's character in any way. It didn't really develop any vampire characters really beyond what we already knew about them, for the most part. The only characters that were developed in any fashion were the characters that were unique to this particular book, that exist purely to help propel the plot along. That's it. Which also means that you take away the plot, you take away those characters, again, there's nothing left. To make this worse, this book is, the events of this book are referenced in some of the other books. Not too much that you're like, oh my god, I missed something. No. There's brief summaries of what occurred in this book in other books I've read since. Granted, I've only read a few more books since, but the references are there. And the summaries are only like maybe a few sentences or a brief discussion between characters that brings it up. And I felt those sentences were enough to tell me what happened. As if all the other details from Memnoch the Devil were unnecessary. Because in the end, they did feel unnecessary. I would think, like, the purpose of mentioning something like that, I would think, is to kind of entice you to kind of tease you and go, okay, I missed something, I should probably go back to that book to read it, to find out. But I didn't feel anything like that while I was reading those minor references. That just defeats the purpose of the references overall. The fact that I forgot about this book, even with the references, and felt no need to go back to this book after reading said references, just, to me, shows how little importance this book has in the grand scheme of the entire series as a whole. Now, I might be corrected later on down the line. I'm only a few books on from this at the point of this video, so that could change later on. I might come across something later on and be like, oh, I'm glad I read that part in the book. But as it stands right now, I could have completely ignored this book. Like, I could have just kept this book on my shelf and not touched it. And it wouldn't have mattered. Like, the summaries were enough to basically summarize what had happened, the few important points that were happening in this book, and, like, that's it. I know I'm repeating myself, but Memnoch the Devil has no reason to exist. Even more so than the Tale of the Body Thief. At least the Tale of the Body Thief still had a little bit of something left over if you took the plot out. This one doesn't. That's literally all there is. And that's fine if you like the book. If it's a book you enjoy, that's perfect. But to me, it was pointless. It was completely pointless to have this book. Anne Rice has written other books over the years since this one that talk about, you know, her beliefs when it comes to Jesus and God and stuff like that. And that was almost exclusively what she wrote for a while, and if that was something I was interested in, I would have gone and picked up those books. Okay? But that's not what I read vampire novels for. That's not what I read the Vampire Chronicles for. My final rating on the book is a 1 star. That's as low as I can get, really. What else can I say that I haven't already said? In all seriousness, if this is your thing, great, pick it up. But if you're like me and you read vampire fiction for the vampires, you're going to be disappointed. Because there's little to nothing in here. You can ignore this book, and it won't matter. This, to me, is a failure in terms of writing. In terms of publishing a book in a series. It felt like writing just for the sake of writing it, and it to me has no place in this at all. But what about you guys? What do you think about Memnoch the Devil? Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree? Let's discuss it in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to find out your thoughts. And with that, I would like to thank you all for watching this video. I post a new one on Tuesdays and Fridays. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!